action? I kind of feel like I need, like, makeup wardrobe. Yeah, I know. I always watch like the makeup artists puff and do stuff. I'm like, you're literally just paint. Like, you're literally not doing anything. Am I right? Like, why do you keep?
All right, so I'd like to welcome everybody to the Curriculum Committee of the West Bend School Board. It is September 19th, 2023 at 4:30 p.m. at the Education Service Center. We will start with introductions. I am Melanie Ergott, School Board Member.
Kelly Lang, School Board Member.
June Kruger, School Board Member.
Heather Isaacson, Program Administrator.
Kelly Downs, Curriculum Coordinator.
Tina Van Roo, District Data and Assessment Coordinator.
Erin Faust, Program Administrator.
Quinn Trueblood, Director of Curriculum and Instruction.
Okay, we will move on to our first portion of the agenda. It is Career Readiness Work-Based Learning Courses, and that will be presented by Tim Harder.
Good afternoon, everybody. So Melanie's used to this. It's about fall time where I come and talk about some changes related to career and technical education. For our new board members on the curriculum committee, we follow a very similar cycle just to what Dr. Trueblood has talked about of our curriculum reviews. However, we have a lot of outside sources that also feed our curricular changes. And so sometimes that's Moraine Park, and sometimes that is the state of Wisconsin. And so I don't think in the 5 years I've worked overseeing career and tech ed curriculum, we haven't brought a change forth related to one of those two institutions in the fall time frame. So real quickly today, we have a couple of things that we would like to bring to your attention and then bring hopefully to the full board for approval. One of them will relate to some things that we want to be able to offer this year, which are just naming conventions, and I'll explain those. And then with that is also a removal of some courses that are outdated at that point in time. So in your agenda on board docs this evening, you'll see what we are looking for is we're making changes to the youth apprenticeship program here in West Bend, and this is related to what the state of Wisconsin does. So the youth apprenticeship program is actually run in conjunction through the Department of Workforce Development, supported by Wisconsin DPI. And with that, we have pathways where students, once they complete a certain amount of courses or experiences, they can go into a work-based learning environment and get a youth apprenticeship certificate through the state of Wisconsin. And those have a variety of pathways that you will see, and we'll talk about a few of them tonight. For example, we have a student who works in business management who runs our school store here as a youth apprenticeship. That's a pathway that those students are in. Every year I have an IT student that works for us in youth apprenticeship. They go through IT courses with us or have to be concurrently enrolled with them. This past summer and this last spring, the state started making some adjustments and talking about some changes to some of the naming conventions and the pathways that they offer. And so with that, we're actually really excited for the first one. As you may know, we are in our first year of a redone education pathway for our students here, where not only do we offer courses related to early childhood education, we offer courses for our students who are interested in becoming K-12 educators. And so we do that in a partnership with our own staff, UW-Whitewater and UW-Oshkosh. And so the state has brought on a youth apprenticeship with the Department of Workforce Development, a youth apprenticeship certificate for our students who want to go on to be teachers, both K-12 teachers and early childhood. So this would be an add of a pathway. And when we talk about this, this does end up in our course planning guide as a course our students can select. And thus, that's why we're bringing it in front of you and then hopefully to the full board for approval, because we want to add that to our course planning guide. It will actually be split into two pathways. One will be the early childhood education pathway. So our students will actually have two opportunities. They can do a smaller co-op, which is a work-based learning experience, or they can do a larger early childhood education piece. And the larger one comes through the youth apprenticeship. You have to do 400 plus hours. You're evaluated multiple times during the year. You have on-site visits by our career coordinator here, Brenda O'Brien. The second one then is for our students who are interested in K-12 education. Right now, currently, we are looking at what that looks like, because typically your apprenticeships are paid. And so this will be new for our K-12 environment to have paid teacher support in the classroom. But that would be an add that we would have, that we would ask if this gets to the full board for this year. We have some students who would be ready for that actually second semester with that new education pathway. These were actually just added by the state officially the end of August of 2023. So we just learned about them. The second one is a rework of the business program and adding a pathway called business administration, which is split into 2 pathways for our students. The first one is administrative professionals related to information processing and office technologies, and the secondary is a huge need, and we have students coming out of our business management program looking for experiences related to this in HR and becoming an HR professional. And so those would be 2 new adds that we would ask that eventually the board approve to be added for our students this year, so that they could take advantage of those and earn those certificates this year already. Any questions on the adds? All right. So then with that, we have some outdated or some removal of some courses that will happen for the 23-24 school year upon approval by the board. The first one is the removal of a course called Youth Apprenticeship Culinary. That pathway no longer stands as its own standalone. The state has now moved to a inclusive piece of hospitality, lodging, and tourism, because our students are actually crossing multiple paths there. So I grew up in Wisconsin Dells. Obviously, tourism is a huge industry there. If you were to go on to UW Stout and some of these places, you aren't always just working in culinary. You're working in the hospitality piece, often tied with lodging and that tourism piece. And so the state is trying to expand that opportunity to a larger pathway for our students and give them learning experiences in both. So sunsetting the culinary piece. They also no longer have a specific pathway for welding that's been incorporated into manufacturing as a whole to give our students, when they go out and do their youth apprenticeship experiences, that we aren't looking for a placement for them for 400 plus hours where they are just welding for those 400 hours. And so it allows for a little bit more of a well-rounded student as they leave at that point in time. The third course that we would look to sunset then and ask for approval on that is a course called Independent Study and Career Exploration. And this was a course that was developed for the need of, we didn't have a place for work-based learning at the time for our students to go into education. So many of the students that were taking this course, 4 or 5 of them a year, were working in our classrooms here. They didn't have the co-op, we didn't have the education pathway for K-12, and now that we have that pathway in this new youth apprenticeship piece related to education, we would sunset this course also starting next school year would be the ask at that point in time. Any questions that you would have?
Looks like there's not any questions. I just think that it's great that we have all these opportunities for students. I wish they had this when I was in high school. I feel like it was the regular high school classes and then you go on to college and that's it. So I think it's great that we offer all these, and I don't really see any problem with any of these changes. So thank you for presenting that.
Then we will
today.
bring them to the board in October for discussion and approval. Thank you
Okay,
very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to also note procedurally, I think it would be good form that we as a committee would recommend that these changes, that you would recommend them. Also the removal. So just because we're learning how to do a flow through in our process, it would be wonderful if Chair Aragot said, I recommend that these changes be moved to the board, and also have a second, and also recommend that these, as noted, would be removed and have a second. We'll just try something like that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, then I would recommend that these new courses could be added. These changes would be made. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. And then also, what was the other? And then the courses that would be sunsetted, I also would recommend that that would be sunsetted. Would there be a second?
Second.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next item will be the 2023-2024 Fall Assessment Overview, and that will be presented by Tina Van Roo.
All right, hi, thank you for having me. I know this summer, Superintendent Dr. Wimmer presented to the full board the assessment calendar that took a look at all the different assessments that we give and what was the plan for this year. So tonight we're going to focus on what's happening right now in fall and also do a little preview of what's going to be coming up in later fall as well as winter. The state of Wisconsin has developed a strategic assessment system, and there's multiple lanes and tasks and to do to make that system happen. One of the big components of that system is screening. When we screen students, we select assessments that are nationally normed, which is great because we can see how students are doing compared to their academic peers nationwide in the same grade level. We use two different screeners. We have STAR, which is utilized for students in grades K through 8. And then new this year, we also use pre-ACT, actually administered for the first time yesterday. When we get data back from those assessments, it allows the teachers to be responsive in their teaching because all the data that comes from it is really information about what the students know at that point in time. Since that data is nationally normed, it also helps us shine a spotlight on students if they might need additional supports in the classroom, if there's any skill gaps or high achievement that needs further challenging. Lastly, with screening, we screen multiple times per year, so that allows for student growth to be tracked throughout. We'll take a look at STAR first. STAR has 3 different assessments. By grade level, different students participate in different assessments. So students in grades kindergarten and first take STAR Early Literacy, which is a pre-reading assessment heavily based in phonics. In grades 2 through 8, students take STAR Reading. And then also in grades 1 through 8, students participate in STAR Math. And then the Renaissance icon below is just to represent the company that provides that assessment for us. When we get STAR results, we get a lot of different information, and since we give STAR 3 times a year in fall, winter, and spring, it kicks out 2 different ways for us to measure how our students are growing. The first way is looking at the scale score, which is the raw score of the assessment. Ideally, as highlighted in the graphic on the left circled, the scale score would increase every time the student takes the test. So every time if that number gets bigger, we're seeing that growth in that test. The second measure is a score called SGP, which stands for Student Growth Percentile. This one's a little bit more unique because it's no longer just saying how that one student did, but it's comparing them to their academic peers nationwide. And it shows a growth range if they grew at a low, typical, or high rate. That SGP would be available after the students have been screened 2 times, so we would have data to share on that after our winter administration is done. New this year is the pre-ACT. The pre-ACT is administered to our 9th and 10th graders, and it's going to be administered just 1 time, and I'll explain why in the next few slides. But the pre-ACT assesses students in 4 different content areas. So they are assessed in English, math, reading, and science. In the previous years, when our high schoolers took the STAR exam, they were just getting the math and reading test. So the addition of this pre-ACT increases the data that we get by providing that universal information on science. There's also combo scores that come behind the scenes, such as a STEM score. So like I said, yesterday was the first day that we administered it. It was over 900 kiddos taking the test. Our high school administrative staff worked really hard to pull off a unique day where our students were testing in the morning. Opposite of that, our 11th and 12th graders were participating in a variety of college and career activities. So it was a really unique day, and they did a great job organizing the flow of it. All right, this slide is a little busy, so bear with me, and I promise I'll walk you through it. The reason that we give pre-ACT just 1 time in the fall is because in springtime, the state requires that we do some state summative assessments. So in the spring, we give the pre-ACT secure for grades 9 and 10, and then grade 11 takes ACT. The really cool thing about these assessments all together is we can now see the scores fall to spring and year after year after year. As noted in the English row with the green arrows, you can see the different readiness benchmarks that are provided by this ACT suite. So if students in the fall reach a benchmark score of 12, they then in spring, when they take the state exam, reach a 13, eventually a 10th graders 14, 15, and ACT as 11th graders is 18. So the difficulty in that benchmark is appropriate for that time of the test as well as the grade tested, and that incrementally increases as they age through our system. So we finally have an assessment system at the high school where all the data aligns, and students can use it for 3 years in a row to track their growth, set goals, and then teachers will have access to all this data so they can help support any of the ACT readiness benchmarks for post-graduation. So we screen, and we don't just screen, we utilize results. We don't want to ever waste the kids' time. We make sure that every user has access to the data that they need, and they're using it to kind of hit our tier of our continuous improvement plan, that this data, this information is going to help with improving outcomes for all of our students. Many levels of users use this data. For example, school and districts make school improvement plans. So if they're working on a certain action, they're going to use STAR or pre-ACT or one of the assessments to help measure if their actions are working. We have a system of multi-level system of supports. You might hear it throughout the year referenced as MLSS. If students are ever identified to have a need or a skill gap, the data from these assessments helps to shine a flashlight on that so that the teachers can then be responsive, dig a little deeper, and see what that skill need is. Sometimes when that flashlight is shown, you might find that they have a need for an academic intervention where they would get extra services beyond the classroom, or they might already be performing very, very high and they need some more challenging differentiation to keep them growing at their appropriate rate. Professional learning communities are a group of teachers or departments or grade level peers that meet on a regular basis to discuss data and inform their decisions and help them plan proactively for what the kiddos and the students should be learning and doing. And lastly, we also want the students to be part of it. Teachers often discuss the students' scores with them so that they can goal set for themselves. So it's a really cool way for the students to take ownership and try to bring out the little competitive side of them and reach that next goal that they're setting for themselves. Keeping the families informed about screening results is also very important. This slide is a copy from what was presented by Superintendent Dr. Wimmer this summer. And Skyward Family Access is one of the ways that we communicate the test scores and results to the different families. This is an example of what you might see for STAR results in the system. After screening is completed, the results from the tests would be loaded into Skyward Family Access. And then in the Wednesday Family District newsletters, we communicate that they're ready for viewing, and then we also link some documents or help resources so that parents can understand the scores that they're viewing. In an earlier slide, I showed that the scale score column should always kind of increase in numbers, so this is exactly what the parents would see when they look at those test scores. The STAR screening is still happening this week, so we'll be finishing up with makeup testing and things through Friday, and then next week I'll pull all the information out and get the scores loaded into Family Access, so communication in that Wednesday district news will be coming soon. For pre-ACT, those scores actually have to be sent in via mail and scored and sent back. So we're expecting those scores to come in October. So a separate communication will come out in a newsletter once those pre-ACT scores are available. Fall is a really fun time for data and scores and all that information. So I wanted to preview what's next. In October, since pre-ACT is given for the first time this year, we actually are going to bring in an ACT trainer to train the staff on the score results. One of the cool features about pre-ACT is that they get to keep the test booklets so that when the scores come back, they can do an item analysis. So if we notice, oh gosh, my whole class had trouble with number 16, they can go back to the book, look at 16, go to a PLC meeting, and kind of dig deeper on, have we taught that yet? Do we need to teach it again? And really ask important questions to help try to drive different results when they take it again in the springtime. Also, in October or November, DPI releases the state assessment results from last spring. So I will be back either to curriculum committee or the school board, depending on when that release date is published, to share with you the different results from the Wisconsin Forward exam, the pre-ACT Secure, and the ACT from last spring. All of those assessment results are going to be used to create our district and school accountability report cards, which will be released in November. So you'll get to see me again in November to say these are how those results are calculated and computed to make sure that every school and district has their star rating and their report card for the year. Then right away in December, we start screening for STAR again. So our K-8 students will be taking that again. That way we'll have data and information available prior to the semester 2 change in case any different or new supports are needed. And then in January, I would be able to provide the committee as well as the school board with some winter STAR screening results so we could have a checkpoint on how our kids are doing mid-year on that assessment. The STAR assessment is benchmarked in a way where it's very closely aligned to the state assessment, Wisconsin Forward. So we can often use the STAR results in wintertime as a predictor of how that state assessment is going to go. So it's a great time of year to share our results with you. All right. Do you have any questions about what's going on in fall or what's coming up throughout the rest of semester 1?
You had mentioned the Forward exam, so that one is still going to be administered, but that one's not until spring.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So last spring's testing was the Forward exam, which is grades 3 through 8 and 10. Also the pre-ACT Secure grades 9 and 10, and the ACT grade 11. So all summer long, the state has been working on validating those scores, and they're under embargo, and that's going to be lifted in October. And then the students will start participating in those again in March this year. Okay. So yeah, one time per year for those state exams.
I really like that we're doing the pre-ACT in freshman and sophomore year because I know with older kids, they would stress out when the ACT came around in July, or their junior year. Mm-hmm. And so getting that practice a couple times and early intervention so they do well on the ACT, I think is a great strategy. And I'm excited to see that come to fruition and see how those align in the coming years.
The high school's taking it another step further too, so when they have an opportunity to present to the school board this year, they're able to share how they're using that data and then how they're also incorporating ACT type questions into the regular classroom weekly practices, just so that there's that kind of consistent exposure to those question types. So that way if they don't want to sit down and take a practice test for 5 hours, they're still getting that equal exposure so that they have some sense of readiness before they sit down and take the big stakes exam.
All right, well, it sounds like all the questions have been answered. Is this something that you would like us to also kind of recommend and second?
Not on this one, but I would like to say that we very much appreciate Tina's efforts. She's been here a little while in the district, and we're in very good hands with our data for students and for staff. So thank you, Tina.
Thank you.
Thank you. All
And
right.
I'm going to jump back in.
Yeah.
Before we go to our next agenda item, which is really review and discussion, I would like to share with the committee that we have our very last and most energetic and experienced member on our team, Kelly Downs, with us tonight. So we are complete tonight. I'm so excited about this, to announce this to the whole world, I would say. So Kelly, would you share a little bit about yourself to our members?
Hi, I'm so happy to be here with you. I most recently have been teaching, not even teaching, I was the math specialist at Holy Hill Area School District, where I did lots of different roles there and really enjoyed growing that program. We implemented new curriculum and saw great results, so that was a wonderful experience. Prior to that, I have taught so many different grade levels and in so many different places, from Mequon to Waukesha to a private school. I've done interventionist and 5th grade teacher, 8th grade teacher, 1st grade teacher, lots of different roles. So I'm excited to bring it here.
Yes, and Kelly will be serving in the role of curriculum program coordinator. Thank you, Kelly. So our next agenda item really is for the committee's members' review and discussion in follow-up specifically to the board work session. So there are 3 items that I think are really critical for this committee. The first one was just being sure that the larger picture of how curriculum is developed and also improved in many cycles. What was presented at the work session was really more of a walkthrough on the detail elements. And I guess what I'd like to do tonight is just give members opportunities to either, I think I probably shouldn't walk through again, but I think there might have been some thoughts following for either clarification or for questions. I do feel that these are just not words on cells on a sheet of paper that we can print up. These are real ways that we structurally and process-wise actually get to curriculum that is high value, is responsive, and has good fidelity. And I think those are the core elements of why do we do what we do, is because we want to make sure that our curriculum and our instruction work together. And how do we assure that? We have to have a process. And so what we've done here with our team is lay out a very specific process in 4 areas. And so there are detailed action steps, but what I can tell you for sure is we will, as a committee and as a district, come back to this and hold ourselves to these action steps and mark ourselves and measure ourselves to guarantee that we have a viable and a very high fidelity curriculum. So that's what I'm really excited about, because it is very true that you can put words on paper. It is just more true that we have to walk these steps and make them happen. And when we do that, we'll get success, and that just reaffirms and improves things. So I'm presenting that with that framework in mind.
I do have a question. For this, what would you say is the biggest change from previous development to this plan right in front of us right now?
Thank you for asking that question. I will give you what I consider to be a very quick answer, because I haven't been here long enough to really know what the flow has been in the past. But what I can tell you that is essential is that we are very clear on who participates at what stage in the process throughout. That is, first of all, foremost, the best way to approach that. We have multiple stakeholders in their area of expertise, in their lines of authority, organized. The other thing I think is really critical also is that our teachers really do a very heavy lift on what the essential learning questions are, because that is really what drives what we focus on and how we do what we do. So I think and I think the district is very stronger. There are units of study, and there are essential questions that are being posed, and there are measures for how do we know if students are learning it. There are measures for how do we respond if we don't believe that they're meeting those proficiency levels. That we can always work on, and I will always really concentrate on that to help our teachers and the support people behind them. The other thing that I think is really important is there's always program evaluation, and it always seems like the most boring thing in the whole world, but what it really, it isn't to us, but we live in the real world too, and we know that it can be very procedural, but if done well, it gathers and provides us with information that is critical for what do we do next. And it really engages the stakeholders who are really holding it up. And so Erin Faust actually is the only person right here who has experience with that. And I'm very encouraged to know that Erin has great skill and high fidelity. What we have to get really good at least when I'm here, and we might already be very good at it, and I hope to find out that we are, is that we follow through on our findings. And we kind of close the loops that we said were important to us. Because what's the whole point of doing it if we actually don't action it to make the gains that we really care about? So what Erin and I have done along with the team is that we do have a schedule for program evaluation for all 12 content areas in the district. And what we can manage well is really doing 2 program evaluations a year. Now I say that with some caution because there's always things that come up that really take over our time and our high priority. So if we can get 1 or 2 done a year over the cycle of multiple years, we will be doing a very good job, and in the process, we get really good at what we're doing. And so that should really accelerate. It shouldn't bog us down. That should actually be a well-oiled machine. Erin, would you agree with that? Yeah, she's nodding, actually. So I have to tell you that this is critical work, and it takes close, hands-on, hand-tying everybody together. But to answer your question, I think program evaluation is really significant because it gives us information that we need to kind of flow through the process for improvement. And lastly, I am actually very confident that action plans, if they're created well and by the people who are doing the work, they are real living documents of how we spend our time and what we care about. And so this column of action plans, I have done well in my prior work. I haven't done it yet in West Bend, but when you look at all these elements and you just narrow down on them and you do a good walkthrough on each of them, you actually get something that is not only doable, that actually gets the results that we care about. And when I say what we care about is that we have learning goals and we have development goals. And if we can really meet those goals as we design them and adjust if we can't, that will really show up in not only numbers, but I believe firmly in the positive student experience through their learning stages. Okay? Thank you. Okay. Are you ready to go to the next agenda item? Okay, thank you. So the next one is actually, again, a second review by the committee right now on material selection, specifically primary resource adoption and the overview that was presented to the board at the work session. I want to just restate what a primary resource is. Those are all the materials that are used for instruction for all students in the classroom. Oftentimes, you'll see materials such as textbooks, novels, science kits, workbooks, practice masters, tests, online and digital sources, and other project artifacts that make up these basic sets of instructional resources, and that's what we're calling primary resources. Okay. So here again, this is really an overview of how these resources are adopted, going from participants. And as the board has done iterative policy reviews and language around that, what we have right now is the present general criteria for what would constitute eligibility for adoption for these resources, or the qualities, I should say. There's also specific criteria for the qualities within the primary resources up for adoption. And also, probably very significantly, how are they selected, the process? And then once they get adopted, what follows after that? So do members have any questions about this particular overview? Yeah. And just to state that this particular resource overview process does go through the curriculum committee. It also then goes to the board for its full approval. So that's when it is formally adopted. What I also have is, which was not, this is an addition specifically for this committee, is there is a, can we go to the next frame, please? There is a visual for the participants in this adoption process for primary resources. Here we go. I think what this does is it just creates all the words and shows up all the people. And I think it was, I can't remember who gave me this idea. I think it was the board president, so forgive me if I want to be right here, but I'm just dialing up. Anyway, the board president said it would be nice to have a visual, and maybe a funnel would be universal. So here we have a funnel. And so I did make this graphic, so if you have other artists who are better, you can just tell them who I am and connect me. But I think this might be sufficient. What we have at the very top of the funnel, as you can see, any funnel really is the widest part. It's the largest area of this object. And so we have tremendous amount of instructional staff who are experts in their field of content. They will begin the process of reviewing and selection. The principals then will become engaged and also do their review. Moving further into this process, the district librarian would also be a part of this process, which then would move to the director of technology for his review, and then would come to me for my review as the director of C&I. So here's where the next part, and I think is a very significant part, but this is the first part where it goes outside of our system, of our education system. And this is where we would have publication, announcements, and invitations for the community at large to review these resources. And then after that, the feedback that's gathered from the community's review would then be summarized and presented to the committee here. And the committee would then do its summary review of all of the inputs. And then discuss and possibly make a recommendation. Okay? If the committee would then make the recommendation, it would go up to the full board for its review and also to take your recommendation or to ask questions. Okay? Is that clear? Do you like the visual? Okay, thank you, thank you. Maybe I should have done that instead of all the other words, but now I know, Thank you. So the next item, if we're done with, yes, June.
So when it comes forward to the curriculum committee, is it going to be 20 at a time, or how big will that list be initially, or will it be consumable, I guess, by this committee within a week's time?
Is your question is how many of these adoptions would we have in a year or at a time, you mean?
Yes.
Or what is the volume of that?
The volume.
Well, I can anticipate we'll be very busy this year, and I will make it a priority to really focus on what the Act 20 letter of the law is telling us to do. So just as, and you will get the administration, this department's more detailed updates, but for now, related to resource adoption or curriculum adoption, we do, as a committee, have to recommend to the full board a primary resource for reading, especially for kindergarten through the 3rd grade. That is a deliverable by the end of this year. That is what the Act 20 is compelling all public school districts to provide. So that is actually, so we will be engaging in that process. And Heather Isaacson, sitting right next to you, is really the lead on this. We are developing a timeline to be sure that not only are the resources being reviewed in this manner, but it's actually going through the individuals and the processes that that is being overviewed right now. So you will get real hands-on experience with this, and it will be the most important, probably the most significant adoption in the state of Wisconsin's history. So this is a historical time, so get ready. So when we talk about other adoptions that are not English, at least reading related, what I will do is I will be very judicious in your time and prioritizing whether or not we can or cannot do those things. Because we can't do everything, we have to do the things that are really important. So I would recommend right now in my head that we would prioritize our efforts on the literacy bill and what we have to do with that, and get the committee fully informed about its role in that. And everything else, such as new courses, such as program evaluation updates, et cetera, I think I will be very judicious on making sure that it is loaded properly for all of us to do the work well. And if it can't happen because of this law, it just can't happen because it's lower priority. So I don't think you'll be slammed, and we don't want to be slammed with anything. I think we're going to be very organized and prioritized, and we will put you in a position to do careful review and also to render a recommendation for adoption. Okay? Thank you, June. That's a really great question, because I'm grappling with it every day.
I was wondering how big this list is, because typically we get the agenda 24 hours ahead of time, and then it's like a slew to get everything read before we come. So I guess if there's a little bit extra, like a little bit heads up would be
Yes.
fantastic, or if we
Yeah.
meet more often, or whatever we can do to accommodate.
Absolutely. Thank you for that flexibility, because I think the outlook will be that we will have to probably convene more often than not, for sure, but also that my commitment is to give you information prior so that you have the chance to review in advance. So that is my commitment to you. So the very last item for review and discussion is book clubs and how they are adopted. And again, the overview is in front of you. So there probably needs to be Ms. Aragot and I said there needs to be real clarity on how this is different than the primary resource adoption. So I can offer clarity, and Ms. Aragot, please help me if you think I need it. The difference between primary resource and book club adoption is the committee's role. The committee will not officially approve these books on these lists. What the committee will do is be the oversight that we as employees in the system are really doing what we said we would do in the vetting process. So the vetting process in general is this. We have our primary resource. Book clubs is it's one small thing. It is not the only thing we ever do in our, in our ELA classes. It is an instructional strategy, and we have to use resources to do that. And the resource is a book that a student chooses. So there's the foundation of it. So as you know, it's very important that parents are notified of what kinds of books their kids can choose, that they think their kids, that they want their students to choose or not choose. So right there, because it's under primary resource, it is already officially adopted. Now, what has happened though is that there's a higher level of standard for which books should be on that list for each grade, based on developmental age and based on age, chronological age, and also developmental stage. So you understand that, and we all agree to that. So what I think the work session where it landed for sure was that these books would then go through a new level of vetting based on 3 criteria. The criteria for vetting begins with the teacher to select books that meet the criteria of free from graphic violence, and there was a definition that we're operating with. It also should be free from sexual content, also as defined, and also free from excessive obscene language. And so there was discussion of what is excessive. And really even a little bit of discussion on what's obscene. So I believe where we landed was there were some initial fence posts or bars that were set at K through 6, also 7, 8, also 9, 10, also 11, 12. So what we've done is executed just as the board had stated, that our teachers would then go and look at their book list for their units of study, that they would look at these criteria, and they would eliminate books or add books that met them. That's actually a very difficult process. I know it sounds easy to do, but we all have to learn to do it. And so we have a first round already. Our team has been, if we were salt miners, we would be rich right now. Right now, we're in the cave of curriculum instruction. We are getting lists from our literacy specialists and our principals, and we're literally going through the exercise of what would it look like to populate that information in that parent letter. You know, to say, here's the title, here's the book, author, here are the 3 criteria. What do we know about them in these books? And where are the links that parents can go to get additional information? So we understand very well as a team what that process looks like. And this is something that we eventually would hand over to our teachers, but it's a highly supported process right now. We're doing it together. It actually, we've discovered that there's some complexity to it, so we're working through it. But nonetheless, I want to thank the teachers involved right now who are working with us on that. I also want to thank very much Aaron and Tina for doing the first pass. Heather and I are doing the next pass. I want to thank Kim Christensen, who's also on the team from the library side. So the things that we've discovered is that there are descriptions that we're using either in Destiny or another major resource that can be universal for all the teachers to present. So that's one good thing. Secondly, we also think it's important to include in that parent notification information that is, I think, maybe not entirely useful, but it gives us grounding. So one of those things is really, what is the unit of study these book lists are in for quarter 1? What are the standards that are associated with that, academic standards? And lastly, what is the essential question that is being asked using these resources for students to learn from? I think that's really the body of the instructional work that we live with, but we want to share that with our parents too. So here we go. And then what happens is our literacy specialists, if our team is asking more questions because it's not clear the criteria, and we're asking the teachers to respond to us, so we can either clear that book or we can omit that book. So we're in the process of going back to our 7th grade teachers right now to go through that. We haven't quite gotten there, but I think this is the first couple rounds. I think it's slower because we're learning, but once we get our flow, it'll go faster. So 8th grade will come next, and then high school will come after that. Okay. I know that 5 and 6 was included. It is not as critical at that grade level because they have other instructional strategies that are far more significant at that time. And developmentally, it's just not necessary. So that is lower on the list of, getting that materials ready. Okay. So what happens to that? Our teachers, do their parent notification on the timeline with the notice, all those parameters that we felt were appropriate to help parents know and decide. So the committee's job here is the way that the steps that were laid out for how these books are vetted. That's what I'm coming to you with, to say, yes, we have done those things, and yes, we're ready for instruction with that type of material. So I ultimately would be responsible to report to you. So if there's a breach in that protocol, that process, I would disclose that to you. But what I think the committee's role here is to be the oversight that we are doing our job with this very specific area of book club selection books. So to be very clear, it is not an approval stance. It is an oversight stance. So could we have any discussion on that, so that that's real clear?
Yeah, so, okay, I really appreciate all the work that everybody's putting into this, because I know it is a huge undertaking to go through all of these lists that everybody's been used to for how long. So I really appreciate all the work everyone's putting into it. And like you had said, there was some community members that had, maybe reached out like, well, the curriculum committee doesn't vote. But after speaking with you, you're right. Like, if all of this general criteria is being followed for the book lists, there really shouldn't be any reason that we would not approve something that came forward, right? Because it would all have fallen into the criteria that the board originally helped to set up, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, so, yeah, I guess I don't really have a ton of other questions about it, but I just want to say I really appreciate the staff and everybody that is going through this big, this big job, because I know that it's not a quick thing, and to know every detail that's in every book, it might be tricky to find all that information, and so I just really appreciate the layout here and all the work being put in with that. So.
I think we all have a large job on our hands to evaluate, to implement the process and learn from the process. I just feel strongly that I really appreciate the teachers. They know, and they're professionals. They can pick the literature that's appropriate for the age group. I know by the time students get to high school, there's just a huge their growth is very different. There's such a variety in their growth at the high school. You could have kids who are reading at a very low level, and we want to continue to challenge the students who are reading at a very high level. So, I believe that the books that are offered should continue to offer a variety of, things that are going on in our, that cover a wide variety of social issues and issues that give a student a chance to read about something, be exposed to something, think about it, discuss it, and come to their own conclusions, because that's how our children learn. I think we'd be doing a huge disservice to them if we're taking out books that wouldn't address new topics.
Thank you so much, and I am really, what you're speaking about really aligns to the specific criteria that have been laid out. So I think we are in pretty good shape there. And this is a real time to acknowledge that change is difficult. Any change is difficult, but sometimes some change feels worse than others. And so I think our staff have a wide range of emotions around this. But what I can say is that it is not, there's a lot of empathy, but also I think there's a real opportunity to embrace clarity and unity. Like, we're being clear about how we're doing it, which is, I think, a huge step, but also unifying, being unified to say, okay, if we do this together, it will just be easier and feel better. So that's the position I always would, I work really hard to get there. And so there will be instances where it doesn't feel great. There'll be instances where it feels amazing. But we're just going to take all those experiences, and really what our team is committed to is doing our job well, so that this committee understands and appreciates that we are have high fidelity to the process.
I just had a comment too on like what you said about having such a variety of different topics, and I think that can still be done, you know, staying in the parameter of being free from sexual content and the graphic violence and excessive obscene language. You know, you can still hit different topics without including those three parameters, and certainly there's obviously the parent permission form that would have all the information so parents can determine if particular topics are off limits for their child. So I think we're on a really good track, and I'm excited to see, how this all.
We're excited.
right?
We're excited to kind of hopefully move on to something else, honestly.
Yeah,
But this is good rigor for all of us.
yeah, right. Okay, well, if there's not any more questions, just want to thank you for your presentation tonight as well, and make a motion to close the meeting. Should I do that? You second? Second. All right, so we will close the meeting then.